Death is the ultimate escape. But the government has spent centuries turning your decomposition into a legal minefield. Imagine being sued from beyond the grave or fined for dying in a town that's officially full. Today, we're unearthing 50 of the most absurd, hilarious, and baffling laws regarding burials, coffins, and cemeteries. Your final exit is about to become a complicated legal circus. Let's explore the bizarre chaos that follows you 6 feet under. 1. In Michigan, it is technically illegal to mock or make fun of a funeral or the deceased during a service. This law, rooted in the state's penal code, protects the solemnity of the ceremony from hecklers or anyone who might want to settle an old score at the graveyard. It's a legal shield for your dignity, ensuring that even if you were the town jerk, you get at least 1 hour of peace without anyone pointing and laughing. It essentially makes too soon a legal standard. Have you ever been to a funeral where someone really deserved a bit of mockery? Or is the law right to keep things strictly civil? 2. In the remote Arctic town of Longyearbyen, Norway, dying has been technically prohibited since 1950. The reason is the permafrost. Because the ground never thaws, bodies don't decompose. They stay perfectly preserved, effectively turning the local cemetery into a giant freezer for ancient viruses. When scientists found that 1918 flu victims still contained live samples of the virus, the town banned all burials. Now, if you're terminal, you're flown to the mainland. Is the prospect of being a permanent popsicle in the tundra actually worse than a standard burial? 3. For a few $1,000s, U.S. federal law now allows for space burials. Under FAA regulations, small portions of remains can be legally launched into orbit as secondary payloads on rockets. Once the capsule reaches space, it eventually re-enters the atmosphere and burns up like a shooting star. It's the only way to legally bypass every burial law on Earth by literally leaving the planet. It's the final frontier of funeral planning, turning a burial into a cosmic event. Would you want your final act to be a high-speed orbital flight? Or is the ground just fine? 4. Alabama state law is surprisingly picky about what you can actually be buried in. According to their health codes, it is illegal for a funeral director to use a fake or simulated coffin for a real burial. This means you can't just paint a cardboard box to look like mahogany and call it a day. The state mandates that the casket must be a functional, solid container. While this sounds like a consumer protection law, it also prevents people from choosing cheaper, DIY options. If you want to go out on a budget, Alabama is going to make sure you pay for the premium woodwork first. 5. In Kentucky, it is a felony to remove flowers or decorations from a burial site without permission from the next of kin. This law was designed to stop grave stripping, thieves who steal fresh funeral arrangements to resell them. It turns out Kentucky's legal system considers a stolen carnation from a tombstone just as serious as many violent crimes. It's a harsh reminder that once a gift is given to the dead, it belongs to the dead, and the state will enforce that ownership. It's essentially the state acting as a very aggressive, legally armed gardener for the afterlife. 6. New Jersey recently updated its laws to allow humans to be buried alongside their pets in specifically designated cemeteries. Previously, state law was incredibly strict about keeping human and animal remains separate to maintain public decency. Now, you can legally share your final plot with your favorite dog or cat. It recognizes the deep bond people have with their animals, ensuring that forever includes your furry friends. This shift shows how burial laws evolve to meet modern emotional needs. Is being buried with a pet a comforting idea to you? Or should cemeteries stay strictly for humans? 7. Georgia has a long history of regulating behavior in cemeteries, and one of the weirder relics is the ban on public entertainment, or boisterous play, near graves. While Victorian families used to love having Sunday picnics in graveyards, modern Georgia law allows local municipalities to ban anything that looks like fun. In some towns, this means no eating, no drinking, and definitely no music. They want the atmosphere to remain strictly somber. Does the idea of a graveyard picnic strike you as a beautiful way to remember the dead? Or is it just plain disrespectful? 8. In Wisconsin, it is strictly illegal to charge a toll to anyone traveling to or from a funeral. This archaic but still active law ensures that grieving families don't have to fish for spare change while in a funeral procession. Whether it's a private bridge or a turnpike, the funeral pass is a real legal thing. It's a small but significant gesture of respect from the state's transportation department to the departed. Imagine reaching a toll booth with a hearse and just being waved through like a VIP. It's the one time in life, or death, where you get a free ride. 9. New Hampshire law dictates that cemeteries are strictly off-limits after dark. While many parks have similar rules, the penalties here are unusually specific. Being caught in a graveyard after sunset can be classified as criminal trespass with a side of disorderly conduct. This isn't just about stopping teenagers from drinking. It's a legal tradition rooted in the fear of grave robbers and, historically, the occult. The law assumes that if you are in a cemetery at 2 a.m., you are definitely not there to pay your respects. It's a sunset to sunrise lockdown for the living. 10. For decades, the funeral rule, enforced by the Federal Trade Commission, has been the only thing standing between you and a massive bill. Before this law was strengthened, many funeral homes would charge a casket handling fee, sometimes hundreds of dollars, if you dared to bring in a coffin purchased from a third party. Today, it is federally illegal for a funeral home to refuse a casket you bought online or at a retail store, and they cannot charge you a penny for receiving it. It's a rare win for the consumer in an industry that traditionally relies on your grief. 11. In Vermont, historical tradition allowed for the installation of grave windows in cemetery plots. Timothy Clark Smith, terrified of being buried alive, had a glass window placed directly above his face in his tomb. He also included a bell and a breathing tube just in case of a premature burial. Today, you can still hike to his grave and peer through the grass-covered glass into the darkness below. It's a literal window into the afterlife designed for the ultimate claustrophobic. If you were buried alive, would a window make the situation better or 10 times worse? 12. If you're an avid angler, be careful where you cast your line in South Carolina. Under state law, it is strictly illegal to hunt or fish on any land used as a burial ground. This law prevents people from treating the serene ponds often found in garden-style cemeteries as their personal sporting clubs. It keeps the atmosphere respectful, ensuring no trophy base are snagged during a solemn funeral service. The law ensures the only things being hooked are the memories of the mourning families. It's a legal boundary that keeps the dead from becoming unintended spectators to your hobby. 13. Famous poet Ben Jonson found a hilarious legal loophole in the burial rules of Westminster Abbey. At the time, the abbey charged a hefty fee for the ground space required for a standard horizontal burial. Being strapped for cash, Jonson begged for exactly 18 inches of square ground. Because the law was written based on the surface area of the plot, he was legally buried standing straight up to save money. Would you spend eternity standing up just to save a few $1,000s on a burial plot? 14. New Jersey is incredibly strict about disinterment, which is the legal term for digging someone up. You cannot move a relative just because you moved to a new state or found a cheaper cemetery. To move a body, you usually need a court order or the unanimous consent of every single living relative and the cemetery owner. If even one distant cousin objects, the body stays put. The law views the grave as a final resting place in the most literal sense, preventing families from playing musical chairs with their ancestors whenever a better plot of land becomes available. 15. Arizona law mandates the removal of pacemakers before any body can be legally cremated. The reason is simple. Lithium batteries can explode when exposed to the intense heat of a cremation chamber. These explosions can cause thousands of dollars in damage and pose a serious risk to funeral home staff. This means a mortician must perform a mini surgery on every battery-operated deceased person before they head to the furnace. It's a high-stakes safety regulation that turns the local funeral home into a bomb disposal unit to ensure you don't go out with a literal bang. 16. In the state of Victoria, Australia, interrupting a funeral procession is a punishable offense. If you see a line of cars with their lights on, the law gives them a right-of-way that supersedes standard traffic rules. Cutting off a hearse or honking at the slow-moving line of mourners isn't just rude, it's a crime. The law is designed to protect the dignity of the deceased and the emotional state of the living. It creates a temporary bubble of legal protection around the dead on their final drive. Does a hearse deserve the ultimate right-of-way, or is traffic just traffic? 17. Maine allows you to be buried in your own backyard, but the legal requirements are surprisingly specific. You must establish a family burying ground of less than a quarter acre and enclose it with a substantial fence or wall. You also have to record the exact location in the town's property records to ensure the site is protected, even if the house is sold. It's a legal way to ensure you never truly leave your property. Is having your ancestors buried in the garden a comforting thought for you? Or is it just plain creepy to think about during a midnight stroll? 18. South Dakota law is very precise about the depth of your final resting place. While many assume 6 feet under is the universal standard, state law actually only requires 4 feet of earth on top of the casket. If the body is placed in a reinforced concrete vault, the required earth cover can be even less. These regulations are designed to manage soil pressure and prevent groundwater contamination while keeping burial costs manageable. Just don't expect to be exactly 6 feet down if you pass away in the Mount Rushmore state. You might be a bit closer to the surface than you think. 19. In many parts of Brazil, burial isn't a permanent residency. It's more like a short-term lease. Local laws often dictate that after 3 to 5 years, a body must be exhumed to make room for new arrivals. If the remains have decomposed to bones, they are moved to a small, labeled ossuary box, which is much smaller and easier to stack. If you don't keep up with the rent, or if the family doesn't show up for the exhumation, the bones might end up in a communal pit. It's a brutal, practical solution to urban overcrowding that turns the cemetery into a high-turnover apartment complex. 20. In New York, there is a specific law regarding bodies that go unclaimed for a certain period of time. If no family or friends step up to claim the deceased, the law allows the body to be signed over to medical schools for research or anatomical study. It's a pragmatic way to ensure that even in death, a person can contribute to the advancement of science and medical education. While it may sound a bit cold, these unclaimed individuals provide a vital service to future doctors. If you had no one to claim you, would you mind your body becoming a final biology lesson for students? 21. In New Orleans, Louisiana, the law virtually mandates that you are buried above ground in ornate stone crypts. This isn't just a stylistic choice for the local vampires, it's a legal necessity due to the high water table. If you buried someone 6 feet under here, the next heavy rain would literally push the coffin back to the surface. To prevent floating ancestors, the city code requires these cities of the dead to be built upwards. It's a beautiful, eerie solution to a soggy problem. Would you prefer a grand marble house on the surface or a quiet, hidden spot deep in the earth? 22. In the United Kingdom, it is technically impossible to have a private death inside the Houses of Parliament. Historically, anyone who dies within the Palace of Westminster is legally entitled to a state funeral at the public's expense. Because these ceremonies are incredibly expensive and rare, authorities go to great lengths to ensure no one actually dies on the premises. If someone falls ill, they are quickly rushed outside before they can officially pass away. It's a hilarious legal dance where the government literally can't afford for you to die in their workplace. 23. In the French village of Sarpurinx, it is strictly illegal to die unless you already own a burial plot in the local cemetery. This sounds like a joke, but Mayor Gerard Lalande was dead serious when he issued this ordinance in 2008. The village cemetery was full, and a judge refused to let the town expand onto nearby private land. So, the mayor simply outlawed death itself. He even added a warning that offenders will be severely punished. It leaves us wondering, what's the sentence for a corpse that breaks the law? This is the peak of bureaucratic absurdity. 24. If you find yourself in a cemetery in Kansas, you better keep your voice down or face the law. In several local jurisdictions, it is illegal to shout, swear, or use indecent language within cemetery grounds. This isn't just about being polite. It's a specific ordinance designed to protect the quiet enjoyment of the space for visitors. If you get into a heated argument with a relative near a tombstone, you could actually be fined for disturbing the peace of the silent residents. It's a place where the law forces you to give everyone the silent treatment forever. 25. In certain parts of Illinois, an old and oddly specific law prohibits the use of a coffin for anything other than its intended purpose. This means you can't legally use a casket as a coffee table, a bookshelf, or a particularly morbid prop in a haunted house. While it seems like common sense to most, the law was created to prevent people from repurposing burial containers in ways deemed offensive to public decency. It turns out the state has a very clear boundary. Once a box is shaped like a coffin, it belongs in the ground, not in your living room as a conversation piece. 26. Maryland law makes it very clear that second-hand coffins are a massive legal no-no. It is strictly prohibited for a funeral director to sell or reuse a casket that has already held a body. This might seem obvious, but the law was put in place to stop unscrupulous characters from upcycling expensive mahogany boxes after a cremation. Once a coffin has been occupied, its legal journey is over. It's a consumer protection law that ensures you're always the first and only person to use your final vehicle. It's one area where the gently used market is completely shut down. 27. In Texas, the law protects cemeteries from urban sprawl with a very unique right-of-way rule. Under the Texas Health and Safety Code, it is illegal to build a road, street, or railroad through a cemetery without the explicit consent of the cemetery organization or the families of those buried there. Even the state government struggles to use eminent domain to pave over a graveyard. This has led to some bizarre highway designs where massive 6-lane roads have to swerve wildly to avoid a tiny, ancient family plot. In Texas, the dead have the legal power to stop a bulldozer. 28. France has very specific national regulations regarding the materials used for coffins. By law, every casket must be equipped with a waterproof liner and a device that allows gases to escape without causing the casket to rupture. This isn't just about aesthetics. It's a public health regulation designed to prevent unpleasant surprises in above-ground crypts. French law even specifies the thickness of the wood based on how far the body is being transported. It's a masterclass in bureaucratic precision, ensuring that even in death, you are packaged according to strict standards. 29. In Ohio, a woman once made legal history by successfully petitioning to be buried inside her beloved 1964 Corvair. While standard laws usually require a casket or a vault, her lawyers argued that as long as the vehicle was properly sealed and didn't pose an environmental risk, it met the legal definition of a burial container. The court agreed, and she was laid to rest in the driver's seat. This set a fascinating precedent. If a car can be a coffin, where do we draw the line? Would you want to spend eternity in your favorite car, or is that just taking car culture too far? 30. Indiana has a very specific law prohibiting the sale or trade of previously used grave markers. This isn't just about stopping thieves. It's about preventing a bizarre second-hand market for tombstones. You can't just flip a granite slab from the 1800s like it's a vintage coffee table. The law protects the integrity of the site and ensures that a marker stays with its original owner forever. It turns out that in the eyes of Indiana law, a tombstone is the only piece of real estate you can never truly sell or upgrade. Would you mind if your headstone was recycled for a new tenant? 31. Italy provides us with another town where it is legally impossible to die. In 2012, the mayor of Falciano del Masico issued an official ordinance stating that residents are forbidden from crossing the border of earthly life. This wasn't a play for immortality, but a desperate protest. The town has no cemetery of its own and is in a bitter dispute with a neighboring village over burial space. Until a new cemetery is built, the law technically requires citizens to keep breathing. It's a bizarre situation where local politics and biology clash, leaving the elderly in legal limbo. 32. Germany has a strict legal doctrine called Friedhofszwang, which essentially translates to cemetery compulsion. By law, human remains must be buried within a designated cemetery. This means you can't keep an urn of your grandmother's ashes on the mantelpiece or scatter them in the backyard. Even if you choose cremation, the ashes must be interred in a graveyard or a forest cemetery. The state views the management of remains as a public duty rather than a private choice. Does this feel like an overreach of government power, or a necessary rule to keep the city organized? 33. In Minnesota, you better not plan on being buried in your favorite designer suitcase. State law is very specific about the durability of alternative containers used for burial. While you don't need a fancy casket, the law requires that whatever you're in must be able to support the weight of the earth and be aesthetic in the eyes of the cemetery board. This prevents people from being buried in plastic bins or flimsy boxes that might cave in. It's a structural engineering requirement for your final home, ensuring the graveyard surface remains perfectly flat and walkable for eternity. 34. Florida takes its afterlife marketing very seriously. Under state law, it is illegal for a cemetery or funeral home to use unfair or deceptive acts to sell you a plot. This includes things like telling you a cemetery is almost full when it's not, just to pressure you into a sale. They also can't solicit you at a hospital or nursing home when you're clearly in distress. It's a legal shield against high-pressure death sales tactics. Why do you think people are so vulnerable to these sales pitches? Is it just deep grief, or the fear of being left with no options? 35. In the United Kingdom, there is an ancient common law right known as the right of burial. Every person who dies within a parish has a legal right to be buried in the churchyard of that parish, regardless of their religious beliefs. This means the local church cannot refuse to take you in, even if the clergy weren't exactly fans of your lifestyle. It's a remnant of a time when the church and the state were one and the same, providing a guaranteed final resting place for everyone. It's the ultimate safety net that ensures no one is left without a proper home for their remains. 36. Rhode Island has a unique law that protects historical cemeteries, even if they are on your private property. If you buy a house with a tiny 200-year-old graveyard in the corner of the yard, you are legally obligated to allow the descendants of those buried there to visit. You can't just put up a no trespassing sign and block their access. You are essentially a temporary steward of a permanent history. Would you feel like a caretaker of the past, or would having strangers walking through your yard to visit a ghost be a deal breaker for you? 37. In many Spanish cities, burial often means being slid into a nico, a wall-mounted crypt that looks like a giant stone filing cabinet. The legal catch? You don't usually own the niche. You lease it for a set period, often 10 to 50 years. If the family stops paying the renewal fee, the law allows the cemetery to remove the remains and place them in a common ossuary to save space. It's a high-stakes, pay-to-stay system that keeps the cemeteries from overflowing. It's basically a subscription service for your final resting place. Cancel the sub, and you're moving out. 38. South Carolina law makes it a crime to park a funeral procession in a way that blocks traffic for too long, but it also gives them special privileges. Hearses and mourning cars are legally allowed to proceed through red lights at intersections, provided the lead vehicle started through on a green. Every other car in the line can follow, and other drivers are legally required to yield the right of way. It's one of the few times you can ignore a traffic signal without getting a ticket. It creates a bubble of time where the living have to stop and wait for the dead to pass. 39. Virginia has a very strict law against improperly disposing of a body, which has been used to target people who try to perform do-it-yourself burials without the proper permits. Even on your own land, you can't just dig a hole and call it a day. You need a death certificate, a burial transit permit, and specific zoning approval. The law treats an unauthorized burial as a serious misdemeanor, potentially leading to jail time. The government wants to know exactly where every single citizen is located, even after they've stopped being citizens and started being remains. 40. In Iowa, it is illegal for a cemetery to discriminate against someone based on their occupation or lifestyle when it comes to buying a plot. While this sounds like a standard civil rights law, it was famously tested when a cemetery tried to refuse a veteran because of his background. The law ensures that once you're gone, your social status or past mistakes shouldn't affect your right to a peaceful resting place. It's a legal reminder that the cemetery is the ultimate equalizer, where everyone gets the same rights to the dirt, regardless of what they did while they were upright. 41. In Oklahoma, don't expect to find your final resting place at a weekend swap meet. State law explicitly forbids the sale of caskets or coffins at flea markets or open-air markets. The government wants to ensure these vessels meet specific health standards that a casual vendor might ignore. It's a legal barrier preventing the gently used market from ever touching your burial. This ensures you aren't buried in a repurposed crate or a DIY project. Does this feel like a win for consumer safety, or is it just a way to keep prices high? 42. In parts of South Carolina, ancient local ordinances still technically prohibit unseemly behavior in cemeteries, which has been interpreted to include dancing or loud singing. These laws date back to a time when graveyard picnics were a popular social activity, and authorities wanted to ensure things didn't get too rowdy. You can pay your respects, but if you start a TikTok dance routine near a headstone, you might find yourself facing a fine for disorderly conduct. It's a legal reminder that the cemetery is a place for reflection, not a stage for your next viral performance. 43. For a long time in Nebraska, you couldn't legally be buried on a Sunday. This was part of a series of blue laws designed to ensure that everyone, including gravediggers, had a mandatory day of rest. While many of these laws have been repealed, the tradition still lingers in local ordinances. It essentially means if you pass away on a Friday night, your family might wait an extra day for the final ceremony. It's a subtle reminder that even in the business of death, the weekend is sacred. Does a mandatory day off for cemetery staff seem fair to you? 44. Mississippi law is incredibly protective of the items buried with the dead. It is a specific felony to disturb a grave with the intent to steal personal items like rings or watches. While most states have general grave robbing laws, Mississippi statutes are particularly aggressive about the theft of cemetery furniture. This includes everything from benches to decorative ironwork on a gate. The state treats these thefts with the same severity as violent crimes. It's a legal warning that the items you take with you are meant to stay yours forever. 45. If you plan on scattering ashes in Oregon, you better be a fan of paperwork. State law requires a specific permit for scattering remains in public parks or waterways, and you must provide exact GPS coordinates to the authorities. This ensures the state keeps a meticulous record of where remains are located to prevent issues with future land use. You can't just toss a handful of dust into the wind and walk away. The law demands your final act be a documented, trackable event. Is this level of tracking a bit much or just good urban planning? 46. North Carolina has a fascinating history with spite cemeteries. Historically, landowners angry about new developments or roads would legally establish a small family cemetery right on their property line. Because cemeteries are protected and incredibly hard to move, these spite plots would often stop multi-million-dollar projects in their tracks. It's a brilliant, if slightly morbid, legal tactic. A single headstone can be more effective than a high-priced lawyer at stopping a skyscraper. If you could stop a highway by being buried in its path, would you do it? 47. In the early days of American medical history, body snatching was such a problem that states passed resurrectionist laws. These allowed medical schools to legally claim the bodies of executed criminals or those who died in prison for anatomical study. This created a strange legal hierarchy where some people were worth a proper burial while others were donated by default. Today, the law focuses on informed consent, but the legacy of these rules shaped our modern medical ethics. Would you want to decide exactly where your body goes? Or are you okay with the state having a backup plan? 48. Nevada law has a very specific depth requirement for desert burials. Because the soil can be incredibly hard and rocky, the law allows for a shallower burial than the traditional 6 feet, but only if the casket is encased in a reinforced concrete vault. This prevents desert wildlife from disturbing the site and protects the remains from intense temperature fluctuations. It's a set of regulations that acknowledges the unique environment of the American West. It turns out that staying underground in the desert is as much about engineering as it is about tradition. 49. Missouri law includes a unique concept called the right of sepulcher. This gives the next of kin a quasi-property right over the deceased person's body. It means the family has absolute legal authority to decide every detail of the burial, and anyone who interferes can be sued for mental anguish. This law is so strong it overrides almost everything else, ensuring the family's wishes are paramount. It's a legal shield that empowers the grieving to have the final word. It's a reminder that even when you are gone, your family holds the legal keys to your journey. All right, we have covered 49 entries, and only one remains. But before we reveal number 50, it is time for our final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the most mind-boggling rule goes to the village of Sarparanx for making dying a criminal offense. It is the ultimate display of how far human paperwork can go. Do you agree with our choice, or did another law take the crown? Let us know in the comments. Now, for our final number. 50. Massachusetts takes the rest in final resting place very seriously. It is a crime in this state to use a cemetery for any recreational purpose that isn't specifically sanctioned. Technically, according to Chapter 272, Section 73, you can face up to 5 years in prison for desecrating a grave, which has historically been interpreted to include things like playing games or even making loud noises. They aren't just protecting the headstones, they are protecting the vibe. Would a quiet game of chess be enough to land you in a cell? Or does the law only kick in when the frisbees start flying? From frozen Arctic soil to the marble halls of Parliament, the law never truly lets go. The afterlife isn't a getaway from red tape, it's just a change of jurisdiction. If you were granted the power to write one final, absurd regulation for your own funeral, what strange requirement would you impose? Share your most creative ideas in the comments below. Subscribe now so you never miss our next journey into the world's most fascinating and bizarre secrets.